I'm a DC guy. If there's a Marvel versus DC debate, I will always punch in Team DC. Batman alone is worth half the Marvel roster as far as I'm concerned, and I'll take the Justice League Unlimited over the Avengers and the X-Men any day. But these days, if you're a gamer, it is very difficult to be a DC fan. Marvel is fucking decimating us in the gamer department, and it's made me more of a Marvel enjoyer than I used to be. I don't hate Marvel, I just really like DC. There's been a quality clash between Marvel and DC in the game space ever since the early days, and they've traded superiority back and forth across time. In the 90s, Marvel pumped out dozens of flagship games featuring Spider-Man, the X-Men, Hulk, Captain America, the Punisher, even the Silver Surfer, basically tripling DC's output in the same time period, which focused mainly on Batman and Superman. I played quite literally zero of those games growing up, so I can't make any comments about quality, but Marvel absolutely went whole hog on the quantity, which speaks to their initial commitment to the video game space from the outset. As you get into the PS2, Xbox, GameCube era, Marvel widens the gap even further with games like Hulk, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Fantastic Four, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, the new series of Spider-Man games, Ghost Rider, Iron Man, Elektra, Wolverine, etc. Not to say that all those games were bangers, in fact, very few comic licensed games were ever even considered decent at the time on either side. But again, there's way more notable Marvel games than DC games there, and up to this point, the most famous Marvel games have notoriety for being good, like Marvel vs. Capcom, Ultimate Alliance, and certain Spider-Man entries, whereas the DC games are known for being bad, namely 2004's Catwoman and the extra infamous Nintendo 64 Superman game. By 2006, DC had apparently released like 16 different Batman games, and I hadn't heard of a single one of them before looking this stuff up. There's no question in my mind that DC is getting chefed up for the first 20 or so years of the gaming war with Marvel. But then something changes. We get one series that defines an entire generation of superhero games, starting in 2009 on the PS3 and 360 with Batman Arkham Asylum. These are the Batman games that render all other Batman games obsolete, as if they weren't already, and indeed puts all of Marvel's projects to shame as well, besides the 2D fighting games, because fighting games are still fighting games. But if you made a game where your hero moves around and beats people up in a 3D space, your shit sucked compared to Arkham Asylum and its iterations, which introduced a rhythmic, timing-based combat system that is still aped to this day, with an awesome story about inmates taking over the titular Arkham Asylum, and it's up to Batman to fight famous baddies, solve puzzles, and string up countless goons to save the night. One series that carried an entire brand on its back. They still made other games too during this period, but outside of Injustice Gods Among Us, a 2D fighter made by the Mortal Kombat devs, nothing else really mattered or needed to matter, because Arkham Asylum and the essentially perfect Arkham City could define that whole console generation themselves. Arkham Origins also released in the PS3 360 era, but it wasn't the same dev and it wasn't as good. Not bad, but not great. Marvel, for its part, made sequels to its more popular series, like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Ultimate Alliance 2, and I do think Capcom 3 in particular made a sizable splash to date, selling like 10 times more than Injustice with the help of ports to newer consoles. PS4 and Xbox One roll out in 2013, and both DC and Marvel push out sequels to their most popular stuff. DC gets Arkham Knight with the original developers back in the saddle, and Injustice 2. Marvel gets Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. The industry's fleeting obsession with mobile games clocks in around this time, so you get a bunch of garbage Marvel and DC games on there, but DC is still riding Arkham momentum and laying plenty of groundwork changing the conversation around licensed games. That's when Marvel, later into the PS4's lifespan, decides to follow in DC's footsteps and make their own open-world superhero game with rhythmic combat, using the only Marvel character that can rival Batman's iconic popularity, Spider-Man. There were dozens of Batman games before the Batman games, and there were dozens more Spider-Man games before this Spider-Man game, and they all fall to the wayside in the face of this superior quality. Marvel's Spider-Man on PS4 was the most immersive Spider-Man-feeling Spider-Man game to date, and it did basically everything the Arkham series did outside of trophy collecting, but using a character that is more mobile and acrobatic. Web-swinging across the city in modern Spider-Man is still the best general travel method of any game in existence. You can practically feel the wind in your face as you zip around skyscrapers. Batman Arkham City meets Spider-Man New York City. He's your game's biggest fan, and boy does he work. It's with this first Spider-Man game on PS4 that Marvel retakes the conversation, because they've just done DC's best bit and made it just as good. It's now up to DC to respond in kind with another banger to keep themselves in the competition. So what do? Oh, multiple piles of dog shit. We're in the PS5 and Xbox Series X era now, and the next quote-unquote Arkham game is Gotham Knights, made by a different developer once again, and dude, I could not stand more than an hour of this. It was supposed to bring the Arkham formula back in a big way with multiple heroes and cooperative play, but it's just foundationally rotten. Combat feels super wimpy and stiff. They've gone and added loot drops and gear stats, which are things that can work in other games, but not this game. Marvel's Avengers was a famous flop a couple years before this with the same issues, and Gotham Knights was like, why copy the smart kids' homework when we could just pick anybody? If you want to copy a Marvel game, maybe you should pick one that wasn't largely maligned. The people behind the original Arkham games didn't make this one because they were going to work on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League instead, a move that made us go, well, if Gotham Knights sucks, at least Suicide Squad will be good. Then Suicide Squad came out and was so irredeemably rank garbage, it became ground zero for a whole-ass culture war. If you remember my Sweet Baby Inc. episode, those people were involved in this game, but they can't take full credit for the amount of ass on display here, especially with Rocksteady developers going out of their way to say, oh, some of those decisions you fucking hated, actually we did that, not them. The integrity of a comic book property has never been so thoroughly pissed on, and they continue to release abhorrent DLC despite having a current player base of like 400. So DC has crashed and burned. 100% fatality count, no survivors recovered, and the only faint glimmer of tainted hope on the far-flung horizon is a Wonder Woman game helmed by Monolith, which is a dev team that has previously successfully adapted the Arkham combat to a couple pretty good Lord of the Rings games. But Wonder Woman was announced back in 2021, and we've heard nothing since, and it is rumored to be in a troubled state. So who knows if it'll turn out to be trash like Suicide Squad, which was also helmed by a previously revered development team, safe to say that's gone out the window, or if the game will just be in development hell forever. But I hope against hope we get something great out of it, because Wonder Woman has tons of potential as a character to base a similar game around. DC could be in Marvel's face like we had Batman, then you did Spider-Man, but now we've got Wonder Woman, and bring the ball back to Marvel's court. But by this point, Marvel has nothing to prove because they have been going fucking nuts with good games lately. What have they been up to while DC lights itself on fire, you may ask? They've been branching out. It ain't just beat-em-ups and fighting games anymore. Marvel is dominating card games, tactics games, hero shooters, you name it, and their prospects look a lot brighter in the future, too. Insomniac is working on a Wolverine game. Marvel Rivals is going to put Overwatch 6 feet under when it launches next year, if the closed beta hype is anything to go by. Of course, Overwatch has been gleefully holding like 6 shovels for itself over the last few years anyway, but still, Arcane Studios, the good one, the one that didn't get shut down, is working on a Blade game, and there's apparently an untitled Iron Man and an untitled Black Panther game in development too. We're in a different era with superhero games than we were a decade ago. Back then, a Deadpool game releases, nobody expects it to be good, and they are correct. If a Deadpool game was announced today, I don't need to tell you the hype would be through the goddamn roof. DC is doing its absolute best right now to return us to the fucking Stone Age of cringe game adaptations, while Marvel is the dude Chained Together trying desperately to pull his partner back up on the cliff. Marvel Snap is a simple yet deep Hearthstone-esque card game about lane control that I used to be obsessed with. Marvel's Midnight Suns is a surprisingly amazing turn-based tactics game like XCOM. Marvel is just killing it right now, and it makes me sad that I can't see the characters I like more in games that don't suck. If all the best Marvel games right now were DC games instead, if we had DC Snap, DC Rivals, DC's whatever the equivalent of the Midnight Suns would be, some offshoot of the Justice League perhaps, I would be over the moon. I would be a generally happy gamer. I can imagine what it must feel like to be a Marvel fan because your chosen property just cannot stop winning and producing bangers, while my only recourse is to talk up a series that ended in 2015. Must be nice, man. DC, you better get your shit together. Make my Twisted Metal DC crossover idea I did a video about. That'd be a start. But that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos in detective mode, and I'll see you guys next time.